My presentation is titled Being Your Own Self-Advocate, a guide to self-advocating in the workplace. The same basic principle of self-advocation can fit into any job or any profession. Sometimes as a society we're taught that having a disability is shameful and talking about your disability is taboo. This presentation focuses on breaking away from that concept and looking at how you can help yourself by using what you know and what you're already doing in your life to self-advocate. Here's a brief outline of my presentation. Today we'll be talking about, first a bit about myself and my own personal motto, can't means won't. Then understanding your disability, recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, adapting the work environment to fit your needs, self-advocacy, my clinical and co-op work experiences, and finally, how and when to ask for help. Can't means won't for me has become a personal motto in my life. I'm a 22-year-old nursing student attending the University of New Brunswick in Bathurst, New Brunswick, which is a satellite nursing campus. It has about 100 students. I was diagnosed with my learning disability, which is dysgraphia, in 1997, which for me was the beginning of grade 5. I have what some people call a silent disability or a hidden disability, because when you look at me, you don't see someone who has a disability. When I first found out I had a disability, I was mad, I was resentful, I asked, why me? Why do I have to be different? Why do I have to have a disability? And then I took to using my disability as an excuse. I can't do that spelling list, it's too hard. I can't pass that assignment in. I can't became my excuse for everything. And then I met a wonderful teacher, Miss Janet Clare, and she challenged me. She made me mad. She made me even hate her at times. And I did everything in my power to prove to her that I could do something if I tried. And in the end, she taught me that, trying was all that mattered. And then I started junior high, and I was in a program designed for students with severe learning disabilities, or SLDs. Miss Lynn Schaffner-Welton taught me that saying I can't is the same as saying I won't. Saying I can't write that essay is saying I won't write that essay. I've learned that there's no shame in saying I'm able to write the essay by hand, but I can write the essay if I use a computer. I worked very hard and overcame a lot of challenges throughout junior high and high school. I was accepted into UMB's nursing program with a partial entrance scholarship. I have dysgraphia, and for me, that affects my fine motor coordination. My greatest strength is in my ability to solve problems and connect the dots long before others do. My greatest weakness is in my handwriting and my spelling, and I also have very poor depth perception. Although these affect me daily, I have many different tools that I use to adapt my life and my work. I understand my disability. I know what works and what doesn't work for me. The first step to being your own self-advocate is knowing this and knowing how to explain yourself to others. As students, for the most part, we're spoiled in having someone to go to bat to us in regards to helping us explain our disabilities to different classes and teachers. But in the real world, there isn't always someone out there to help you explain. You have to walk into an interview with your own knowledge and explanations and convince someone to hire you despite your disability. Understanding your disability is the first step to doing this. First, what is your disability? How did you feel when you found out or realized that you had a disability? What have you learned about yourself through living with your disability? Can you describe your disability to yourself, to your friends, and to your employer? How have you adapted your life and your home to fit the needs of your disability? Only you can answer these questions for yourself. Next, you need to identify what are your strengths and weaknesses. What are you best at? What needs work? For me, it helps to write out a list. Here are my own 2 examples. For strengths, I have a helicopter brain. I can connect the dots easily. I connect well with patients, and I'm a really good listener. For weaknesses, I have poor handwriting, and I find documenting very difficult. Working on an acute care medical floor or high-paced unit is very difficult for me. It doesn't give me enough time to sit down and document or to plan my care enough. So how do I work around my 2 weaknesses? I choose a hospital that is primarily computer charting versus handwritten charting, and I choose not to work on an acute care floor, but rather to work on a slower-paced medical or rehab-type floor. You need to identify your own strengths and weaknesses, and then how you adapt your life to work around these weaknesses. Look at your home. Based on what adaptations you use at home, identify any additional needs you have for your work environment. Then you need to look at the resources you have. Is the adaptation something you can provide for yourself? Does your employer need to make any adaptations or accommodations to provide you with a good working environment? Knowing this ahead of time gives you an advantage when interviewing for a job. For an example for myself, I use my PDA with the help of my charting, spelling, and looking up medications, for instance. Another example is I've worked with a nurse who's hearing impaired, and she works strictly day rotations instead of a typical day-day, night-night rotation, because at night it's too difficult for her to read lips. Other examples, for instance, would be a TTY machine, technology-wise, or maybe a screen reader. And organizations that were talked about this morning, like Nancy and Duncan's, are really great to giving you an idea of what you need. So thanks to the introduction this morning into self-advocacy by Nancy, it was really great because she gave a really great intro into how to become a self-advocate. So now that you understand your disability and you can explain it, you need to learn to stand up for yourself and your rights and to self-advocate. Legally, you do not have to disclose to any employer that you have a disability. However, there may be certain advantages to doing so, or there may be moral and ethical reasons. For myself, I have an ethical and moral obligation to my patients and to the fellow nurses on the floor to say that I have a disability. My disability affects my nursing care. It doesn't make me a bad nurse. It means that I nurse differently than everybody else, and that's okay. Another example in an office environment is you might require an electric staple or a hole punch, might need a larger working space, or you might require a quiet room that maybe you can shut the lights down to help with glare. So you have a job interview. Now here are the 5 steps to self-advocacy. Step number 1 is introducing yourself. Make a lasting impact and not be afraid to stand up and say that you have a disability and you're proud of what you've done with your life so far. Step 2 is explaining your disability. Do you have a hidden or a visible disability? Explain your disability, how it affects you or doesn't affect you. Appearances can be deceiving. Make it clear to a potential employer what you can and are unable to do. Next, step 3 is strengths versus weaknesses. Do you have strengths that will make you a great asset? What are they? And what are your weaknesses? Explain how you get around your weaknesses and and focus on your strengths. Step 4 is adaptations and accommodations. Do you need any adaptations for your environment and accommodations? If so, what are they? How will you facilitate the adaptation, and what is your employer expected to provide? Step 5 is expectations and accomplishments. What expectations do you have? Does your employer have? What do you expect to accomplish in this new position? Following these 5 steps will give you a good guide as to how to self-advocate. Every person is a little bit different. They may explain something differently than you do. Remember to keep an open eye and to be ready to answer lots of questions. Every job has its own challenges, difficulties, frustrations, and rewards. As part of my nursing program I have a clinical experience where I spend time in the hospital and the community, and these are just a couple of examples of my own challenges and difficulties. For example, I've had one teacher come in and give me all of these wonderful accommodations, and all this great stuff that I can use. I didn't need any of it. And I have had another teacher that refused to do anything. So you have to be able to be very clear and say, okay, this is what I need, and this is how I need it. Other difficulties are in having people understand and explain. People can sometimes be afraid to ask questions. So it's important to be approachable when we say, I don't mind if you ask questions, I want you to ask questions. Some frustrations for me have been that because of my disability, I've been put in that category of a bad nurse. And that's really difficult and frustrating. I've had one instructor who's looked at me and said, I honestly think you're going to kill a patient. Truthfully. And the fact of the matter is, every nurse has the potential to kill somebody. That is it. Nursing is dangerous. A bad day at work, you get mad, you were late for work, you had the wrong report, you submitted the wrong thing, your boss yelled at you. A bad day in nursing is you have the potential to kill somebody. I give the wrong medication, I give the wrong dose, I give the wrong time. Every nurse has that potential. I have that potential exponentially more. I admit that. But along with that, I also know that, and I'm able to identify that, and therefore I'm just 10 times more careful than any other nurse. It's always going to be there. That's the frustration for me, because this instructor only sees that potential. She doesn't see anything else. But going along with that, I have a lot of rewards. There is nothing better than when somebody comes up to you and gives you a hug and says, thank you for being my nurse today. Thank you for taking care of me. Thank you for taking care of my family member. Thank you for being there. And that is the greatest reward anyone can ever experience. Along with my nursing, I've done a number of work experiences, including this summer I was with Independent Living Canada, or IL Canada. I left them at the end of the summer, at the end of my contract, and I was just re-offered another contract because they were so happy with what I've done working with them. So for me, that was another reward to know that I did a really good job and to get another contract. Finally, asking for help can be one of the greatest challenges that you face. There are certain ways to ask for help. First, always use please and thank you. Being polite can be the difference from someone who wants to help you and someone who begrudgingly helps you. Always use I statements, never me and you. It puts onus on yourself and not the other person helping. For instance, I was upset when my coffee was broken. Sounds a lot better than you broke my coffee mug and I'm upset. Or I need some help with this project. Would you mind giving me a hand rather than can you help me? I statements are generally much better received, and a person can be more willing to help when an I statement is used. Ask for help after you've tried at least once with no success. Try to complete the task within reason. And keep trying. Sometimes it takes practice for you to be able to do something. For example, in nursing school, we have to learn to prepare needles and injections, and I had a really hard time with this because of my fine motor coordination. And one time I was drawing up a narcotic, so I was drawing up a drug that's controlled. So I was drawing it up, and then we put a certain needle on to drop the drug and a new needle to inject it. I was trying to take off the filter needle, the needle we used to draw it up, and I actually broke the needle off. So I had the needle in one hand and a syringe with a narcotic in another, and I couldn't get it off. What do you do? Help, help, help. And my instructor had no idea what to do either. Another nurse came and just pulled the plunger out and sucked it up through the end. So it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to try and try again. I've lost count of how many times I've messed up when it comes to needles. I've had to redo it and get it right. So there's no shame in doing it again and again until you do get it right. And sometimes time is of the essence. When you're working on a project, there's absolutely no shame in asking for help to accomplish something faster this time, and then maybe next time you can do it again. Do it by yourself. Okay. That's it for me. I hope through my own experiences and this presentation, I've helped you become your own self-advocate.